Oh man, that hurts.
Why? What happened? You seem like you ended up working out after a very long time.
Oh, not really. I just tried riding my bicycle without training wheels and ended up falling again.
Ooh, that must have hurt. Sounds like you lost your balance.
Unfortunately, I did. So many times. Honestly, I was just lying there contemplating all my life decisions. I'm in my 20s and I still can't balance a bike? Is this even normal?
Whoa, wait. Don't get upset so soon. No one masters balance overnight, you know? Which, fittingly enough, brings us perfectly to our topic for today, the balancing act.
Let's dive right into it then. Welcome to this month's episode of Soul Vibes, the podcast that provides a spiritual perspective to life's ever-changing situations. We will be your hosts. I'm Hitika.
And I'm Sohan. Namaskar, Dhanyankar.
So in last month's episode, our guest shed light upon how the essence of this message of truth has remained the same throughout eternity, even while the medium to express it may have changed over time.
While for this month's episode, we will be discussing everything from the most common aspects of life that we find out of balance, to why this imbalance occurs, and of course the most effective way by which balance can be maintained.
Sounds exciting. Are we also going to cover balancing bicycles?
Let's talk about that after the episode now, shall we?
Okay.
On to the topic. You know, Hitika ji, it's very surprising that in spite of all the progress that we've made as a society and all the comforts we now have access to, so many people still encounter difficulty finding balance in their lives, including myself, of course.
It is astounding, isn't it? In fact, I was researching out of curiosity and I came across a 2022 study by George and colleagues which found that around a third of people worldwide feel that their life is out of balance.
And that's not just a statistic. We can easily find examples within our own lives on the immense impact of not having reasonable balance.
Exactly. Stress levels increase, physical and mental health take a toll, relationships are impacted. There's just so much to lose.
Hit the nail on the head. Anyway, Hitika ji, tell me, aside from a bicycle, what else do you find difficult to balance in life?
Well, a short while back when I had my internship ongoing, it became difficult to juggle my academics, internship, volunteer work, and other tasks. Everything was so overwhelming to balance. It felt like 24 hours just weren't enough.
So, you mean you find it difficult to set boundaries for different tasks and end up being short in time?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, in that case, I think I may have a solution for you. We're incredibly honored to have Reverend Sangeeta ji with us, whose life truly embodies the balancing act. She's a mother of two, has a full-time job, works night shift, and has an elderly family member to look after.
Wow. I sure am about to get a crash course in time management here. Welcome to the studio, Sangeeta ji.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us, how do you manage your time in spite of having such a hectic schedule?
I can say that I'm able to manage my time with the help of my daughters and husband. By Satguru's grace, I have two loving daughters and a supportive husband who don't hesitate to lend a hand.
Would you like to share an instance or two with our listeners of how they usually do so?
Sure. Among many other things, one that comes to my mind right now is housework. They never hesitate to come forward and help out. And whenever they do, it just helps lighten the load.
But even then, Sangeeta ji, there must still be times when you would feel burnt out, right? How do you bring yourself back to balance when you're in such situations?
Sohanji, whenever I feel exhausted, I try to shift my mindset and remind myself that I'm doing all this as a selfless service. These thoughts keep me grounded and help me stay positive.
Wow, that's a profound thought. When we begin perceiving every task as selfless service, doesn't it lighten the burden all of a sudden, Sohanji?
Precisely, Hitika ji. But along with perceiving everything as selfless service, The right intent is also very important. Saints laid emphasis on the actual intent with which one must serve in last month's episode of Soul Vibes as well, and how the three pillars of the Holy Gathering, selfless service, and mindful remembrance allow us to live a life of grace.
That's a timely refresher right there.
Going back to Sangeetaji's point, however, one thing is for sure: surrendering, letting go of one's identity, and perceiving everything as selfless service with the right intent does make life so much easier.
Exactly.
So, Sangeetaji, coming back to you, you touched upon familial responsibilities and how both members of your family and Seva Bhavna help you maintain your balance. But how do you juggle all this with your professional life?
Oh, I try to set boundaries as much as possible.
Could you expound on that a bit more?
Certainly, for instance, I try to time box things in such a way that I'm able to give sufficient time to all my responsibilities. 9 hours to work, 4 hours to household stuff and family, and the remaining time to rest.
And you do this time boxing on a daily basis?
Yeah, I try as much as I can. It requires a lot of discipline. I try to spend less time on things that don't tend to add value for me, such as dedicating excessive time on TV or social media.
Meanwhile, here I am, scrolling through social media all day long, indiscipline in all its glory.
Though, Hitikaji, I'd say discipline is something that can be learned.
How so? I need tips.
I think we just have too many distractions nowadays, as you just implied. I've also seen the time when cell phones were really bulky and so were computers. The more the technology is becoming accessible, the more distractions have unfortunately increased. Don't get me wrong, technology is extremely beneficial. It has made a lot of things easy for us, but we must use it in the right way.
I agree, though how do you think can one deal with these distractions?
I feel like it's really important to determine what isn't adding value for us, cutting down on those things and prioritizing on what actually does add value.
Right.
To go back to the bicycle incident both Sohanji and yourself were talking about, Hitikaji, one may say that practice is essential for one to learn to balance the bicycle. But the truth is, only with discipline can one make time for practice.
Valid point. And to add to that, I just realized that even the 3 pillars of devotion, which are instrumental in helping us remain balanced, the Holy Gathering, selfless service, and mindful remembrance, which you had touched upon earlier, Sohanji, also require discipline.
Precisely. One could have a million excuses to not go to the Holy Gathering or to not serve, but doing it regardless with the right intent is what makes the real difference.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we can then conclude that to manage one's time properly and in order to balance all responsibilities adequately, it is extremely important to try to lend a hand wherever possible and to be disciplined.
And to dedicate every task to the Almighty, or in other words, perceive everything as selfless service.
Yes. Looks like you got a great resolution to your time management concern, at least, Hitikaji.
I sure did.
Which tells me that it is now time to move to our next panelist. But before we do that, thank you so much, Sangeetaji, for sharing your experiences with us. That was very thought-provoking.
Thank you as well, Sohanji and Hitikaji. It was great talking to you on this subject. Nirankari.
Nirankari.
Now you tell me, Sohanji, what do you find hard to balance?
Thankfully, it isn't a bicycle.
Oh, you're not gonna let that go, are you?
Jokes aside, since I too work night shift and have tons of things on my plate, I find it extremely tough to focus on my physical health.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Though just having finished my bachelor's degree in psychology, one thing I have learned is that we also tend to neglect our mental health while continuing to put a lot of emphasis on physical health.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that aspect.
See? So to shed some light on balancing both physical and mental health, let's hear from Reverend Smrutiji, who holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and has also recently finished her Doctor of Medicine degree.
Nirankari.
Sant Nirankari.
So, Smrutiji, throughout your med school and subsequent rotations across several hospitals, I'm sure you've had the opportunity to deal with countless patients from various backgrounds. When a patient is diagnosed with a particular ailment, it definitely impacts the body, but it also takes a toll on one's mental health. What were some of the common traits you spotted in patients that help them balance both their physical and mental health in such situations?
Solanji, from my experience, the most significant trait I observed in patients, well, regardless how favorable or unfavorable the situation was, is faith.
That's interesting. In what way?
Solanji, this faith isn't just in doctor's prescribed regime, but in God's plan. Why factors like availability of right medical and ancillary facilities, sufficient financial means, family support, all play a role in gaining balance, but faith is a pillar that helps us maintain that balance and face any situation, irrespective of what's available.
Never would I have imagined that faith could play such a crucial role in helping us balance both our physical and mental health.
Agreed.
And this is where I feel the divine knowledge also comes into the picture. If we remain aware of the fact that we aren't this body, but we are rather part and parcel of this oversoul, we will remain stable, or in this case, balanced, regardless of the outcome of the treatment. We would perform our duties, of course, but we would be able to gracefully accept the result, whatever it may be, as God's will.
Indeed. Though Smriti ji, right before we were going to begin recording, we were talking about how necessary it is to keep our mental health in check in general also, and how mental health is connected with all other aspects of our lives. I'd like you to quickly touch upon this point as well.
Yes, and this is precisely why, Hitika ji, you are aware we use something called as DSM-5 in psychiatry.
Oh yes.
Wait, what's that?
It stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Okay, and what does that do?
Sohanji, it basically shows us that if a patient's symptoms are causing problems in their social life, at work, or in other important areas, it's a key factor in making a diagnosis. This highlights the strong connection between mental health and other aspects of our lives. Of course, there is no doubt in the fact that physical well-being also plays a big role in a healthy life.
This clearly means that we need to focus on our mental health just as much as we focus on our physical health.
Definitely. And there's certainly nothing wrong in seeking professional help when needed, as he had learned at the recently concluded Southeast Asia Nirankari Forum held in Bangkok last month.
Yes, but I'm also reminded of Her Holiness Satguru Mata Sudiksha Ji Maharaj's divine words that if one imbibes the divine knowledge, challenges like depression wouldn't take root in such a person's life, which I think should be the ultimate goal in this case.
Absolutely.
Smriti ji, one more question for you. It isn't a secret that being in the medical field also isn't easy. As the person interacting with the patients, you also tend to get drained both physically and mentally. How have you been able to balance your physical and mental health?
Eat, sleep, duty, repeat. Oh, no, sorry. It was eat, sleep, simran, duty, repeat, which was true in my case.
That's interesting.
There has been countless times in my life and during the journey of medical school and hospital rotation where I felt as if there is no balance in life anymore. For my own reference, I call it a doom's chain, considering myself the doer, then failing and blaming the God's plan.
Been there, done that. Go on, go on.
Initially, every setback felt like a stone pressed on my heart. But as days went by, I realized something very important. Studying medicine is not a sprint, but a marathon. I feared the future so much that I stopped living in the present. In my mind, it was always like, what will happen next? What if I fail? What if I cannot find my place? And in doing so, I lost the balance between the present and the future.
And I think, Smritiji, this is also something that so many of us can relate to as well. When our thoughts race too far ahead, we forget that God has given us today as a gift. Like the Bhagavad Gita says, you have the right to your work, but not to the fruits of it.
And I'd also like to add that while we can plan for the future, we shouldn't hold on to our plans to the extent that we wouldn't be able to take a different direction if required.
Yes. And this actually reminds me of one of Reverend Raj Pitaji's discourses, which also helped me resolve my own turmoil, in which he had blessed that when we truly surrender to God, we accept both joy and sorrow as a part of His perfect plan. Then, balance becomes less about controlling outcomes and more about anchoring ourselves in the divine.
Beautiful.
Beautiful indeed. So, Anji, I've really been enjoying this discussion with our panelists so far. But as they say, all great things come to an end. Which is why it is now time for us to wrap up our panel discussion and to move on to the next segment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Smritiji, for taking out the time to be here with us today and for sharing your experiences with our listeners.
Thank you, Ji. Sant Nirankari Ji.
Dhaninkarji.
So, Anji, what deep thoughts are you lost in?
I was just thinking, Hitikaji, we talked about balancing time, then we talked about balancing our physical and mental health, but what about our spiritual health? His Holiness Baba Hardev Singh Ji Maharaj would also frequently quote in his divine discourses that we are not human beings having spiritual experiences. Rather, we are spiritual beings having human experiences.
Oh, yeah.
We often get so entangled in fulfilling our worldly responsibilities that we forget to pay attention to our spiritual well-being. How can we make sure we focus on that aspect as well?
Before we get into that, I think it's first crucial to understand how to measure one's spiritual health. Because when we talk about physical and mental health, there are symptoms that we can base our judgment on. What then are the symptoms for us to conclude that our spiritual health is deficient?
I feel like when we incline too much towards materialism, our spiritual health deteriorates. In other words, when we lose balance between materialism and spirituality, our spiritual health is in danger.
Wait, I think you'll have to break that down a bit more for me. I need practical metrics I can measure myself against.
Well, in my case, I try to keep a check on whether I am becoming too anxious, whether I am developing a superiority or inferiority complex, whether I'm harboring feelings of jealousy or hatred towards someone, or whether I'm becoming greedy for more and ungrateful for what I have. For me, these are some of the signals that tell me that I am beginning to incline more towards materialism and less towards the divine, where everyone is perceived as one and no room is left for such feelings.
I'm taking note. Though I also just realized we have doctors for both physical and mental ailments. Who is the doctor for gauging and maintaining our spiritual health then?
Satguru. And this is why it is extremely important for us to seek guidance from the Satguru of the time, Her Holiness Satguru Mata Sudiksha Ji Maharaj. Towards the end of the episode as well, we will be listening to a short excerpt of Her Holiness Satguru Mata Sudiksha Ji Maharaj's divine discourses, in which she will be guiding us on how to balance and what to balance in life.
But before that, I think an excerpt of His Holiness Baba Hardev Singh Ji Maharaj's discourse from the book Stream of Thoughts should also be able to provide guidance to help balance materialism and spirituality, which in turn will keep us spiritually healthy. Let us now listen to Sister Anshi Ji in the segment The Unread Shelf.
In the book Stream of Thoughts, which is a compilation of His Holiness Baba Hardev Singh Ji Maharaj's divine discourses, the following was shared. If a friend gives you a watch to put on, he deposits the same in your trust. You must take care of the watch, but it must not happen that we walk on the road while looking at the watch. If we keep on looking at the watch only, we are likely to strike against someone. We must use the watch but while remaining alert. We may keep our eyes on the road and at the same time, turn the wrist from time to time to ensure that it is still there. The purpose of narrating this small example is to show that God has gifted everything to man. The real happiness or joy lies in their use as a trustee and not giving all the importance to them. Suppose there's a tall building. If we stand on the ground below and look at it, the building appears to be quite high, so much that we have to crane our neck. But if we go to the airport in the same town and look at the same building from an airplane, it will look as small as a toy. This, however, does not mean that the building does not remain tall. In fact, we rose above it. That is why the same building appears to be small. Similarly, when we look at the worldly materials from the spiritual heights of God knowledge, they look unimportant, small, and meaningless. What we mean to say is that material wealth is quite powerful. We indeed admit that it is powerful. But when does its effect end? When does it diminish? This happens when we acquire a higher position, when we bind ourselves to the supreme power, God Nirankari, and are one with it. We make it dwell in our mind. Thereafter, material wealth does not attract us and we always derive happiness from it. We enjoy it. This is how a spiritually enlightened person, a saint, or a devotee would like to act.
How was that?
Simple and straight to the point. And you know that point that Babaji made on rising above reminded me of something.
Really? Please do share.
Recently, a saint's mother had merged into God formless. Her husband asked her, "Why are you weeping?" She answered, "I'm not weeping because I'm complaining. I'm only weeping because her physical presence, her love, her warmth will be missed." And when I heard this, I realized that Satguru hasn't also taught us to become emotionless. Emotions can be expressed, however, acceptance is necessary. Spirituality, especially after listening to the excerpt of Babaji's discourse, I feel gives us this acceptance.
Absolutely. And you know, I also feel that the problem isn't in the material world. Rather, it is in the perception we build about the material world.
Wait, what do you mean? I didn't quite get that.
Let me explain. Several studies have found that excessive indulgence in materialism leads to negative outcomes such as anxiety, depression, and the like.
And how does that connect to what you said earlier?
We only indulge excessively because we delusionally think that these material things are to stay forever. But the truth is, they won't.
Makes sense. So in that case, I think it can therefore be concluded that materialism isn't inherently the cause of the problem. It is the excess of it that leads to the imbalance. Meanwhile, as Her Holiness Satguru Mata Sudiksha Ji Maharaj has guided through a number of her discourses, true spirituality can never be in excess. Rather than being something that overwhelms, spirituality becomes an integral part of our existence.
Yes, and we're basically back to where we started from, balance. And the only effective way I know of that has helped me balance both materialism and spirituality is the divine knowledge, the Brahm Gyan.
No doubt there. And in fact, when we were given the divine knowledge, both the temporal nature of the material world and the permanent nature of God formless were revealed to us. And I personally feel that it is extremely important for us to remain cognizant of both the permanent and the temporary while living life.
Absolutely. I'm not sure whether or not I'll be able to balance my bicycle, but my life is sure going to get a balance boost after this episode.
So is mine.
And now, it's time for us to take leave from our listeners.
Oh wait, what? We're done?
Yup.
Wow, time really does fly. A huge thank you to all our listeners for joining us in this month's episode of Soul Vibes.
But before that, taking leave,
Namaskar, Dhan Nirankar.
तो कैसे एक सुनने में तो लगता है कि एक शायद बैलेंस अचीव करना जीवन में पॉसिबल नहीं है, क्योंकि हमारा जहाँ मन ये चंचल है, एक तरफ अगर लग जाएगा, एक अगर हमने चीज दिमाग में बांध ली तो बस उसी ट्रैक पे उसी को ही सोचता जाएगा और एक चीज की इतनी एक्सट्रीम कर देगा, एक अपनी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू को भी इतना एक्सट्रीम हम मान लेंगे कि हमारे जैसा अच्छा कोई सोच ही नहीं सकता, एक हमारे जैसा अच्छा तो कुछ भी कोई नहीं कर सकता, कोई है ही नहीं इतना अच्छा। कहाँ हम फिर वो बैलेंस दूर दूर तक करते ही नहीं। और ये तो पता ही है, जब एक चीज की ही अति होती जाएगी तो फिर दूसरा एक बैलेंसिंग फैक्टर है ही नहीं। तो वो एक हाइट जहां तक कोई अगर ऊंचा जाता है, अगर कितनी भी पहाड़ की ऊंची चोटी पे चले जाएं, तो एक वो लास्ट फाइनल पॉइंट होगा, वो टिप होगी, उसके ऊपर तो और वो पहाड़ है ही नहीं। तो फिर अब बस एक नीचे की ओर ही जाना बाकी रह जाएगा। तो बात वही कि ये सेवा, सुमिरन, सत्संग, इस परमात्मा से जोड़कर ये बैलेंस बना कर रखने की बात। और वहीं ये भी एक समझाया गया, आज चाहे सुबह वो सेवा दल रैली के रूप की एक स्किट द्वारा ही एग्जाम्पल उन्होंने सेवा का ही लिया कि कैसे हम अगर सिर्फ सेवा की ही एक्सट्रीम करते जा रहे हैं कि एक सत्संग को प्रायोरिटी नहीं, एक बस ये सोच रहे हैं कि आज हमारी ड्यूटी है तो हम पहुंच जाएंगे सेवा पे, क्योंकि वो एक हमें काम दिया गया है तो वो कार्य निभाना है। और मन की खुराक के लिए ये सत्संग को भी प्रायोरिटी नहीं, तो वो सेवा भी बस कार्य ही बन जाएगी, क्योंकि वो भाव तो सत्संग से मिलते हैं। और ये मन में भी अगर सिमरन का घाटा है तो ये सेवा और सत्संग भी फिर वो एक हमारी ग्रोथ के लिए इनकम्प्लीट है। तो यहाँ ये 3 चीजों का बैलेंस है। उस तराजू में वो पंखों में तो चलो 2 पंख की बात थी, यहाँ एक ये निराकार को हर समय रखकर ये सेवा, सुमिरन, सत्संग को ही इक्वली इम्पोर्टेंट बना के रखना, ऐसा बैलेंस करना। और जो ये कर लेते हैं उनके लिए फिर ये जीवन भी बहुत सहज हो जाता है।